Hi everyone, it's such a delight to be back again with another episode on the book of Ruth Bible study. In today's episode, we'll be looking at chapter 1, verse 3 to 5 in detail. Now let's read the scripture portion together. The verse goes on to say like this. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died and she was left with her two sons. They were married Moabite women, one named Orpha, another named Ruth. After they have lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her two sons and her husband. Now, if you look at the verse, in a general reading, this verse about a man, his life in a place called Moab, and what happened to him. It's a very straightforward explanation. But if you look at it in detail, you will realize what happens to somebody who walks away from the presence and promises of God, right? How different were the dreams of Elimelech and Naomi when they decided themselves to walk away from Bethlehem, the house of bread, the house of God, where God's promises, God's law, God's people live. And when the trauma had come in life, when there was a famine, they decided and designed an answer for themselves and they walk away. So moving away from divine agent of famine, they just got trapped into the clutches of death. That's what you will see in this particular verse. But soon after arriving Moab, immediately you will see that Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi as a widow and her sons fatherless. Now, here what is the beauty is that the narrator adds poignancy to the statement and the choice of words that he uses in this entire 2 to 3 verses from 3 to 5. For example, he says, Naomi was left, meaning she was remained. All that she had right now, after she walks away from God's presence to this land that was detestable in the eyes of God, the land where gods of Chemosh is worshipped, she has only bereavement, grief, desolation, and brokenness. When we walk away from the presence of God, all that remains is this. Somebody once said, when you step out from the will of God, there is no protection for you. And when you stay inside the will of God, there is no danger for you. Let me say that statement. There is no danger inside the will of God, and there is no safety outside the will of God. And if you look at this, when Elimelech dies, right, to be buried in a foreign land, it was considered as an ultimate punishment of God, according to Amos 7:17, if you look at it in detail. So Naomi has a new position as the head of this household. It uses the main characters, like there was a man by the name Elimelech, he had wife and children. That's how it starts. So we are under the assumption this is going to be the character, but immediately the narrator reverses by saying, no, he's not. Now the story is switching to Naomi. Now she is not anymore her husband, but rather she is the one heading the family right now, as contrary to what the narrator tried to start with. Right now, what is fascinating here is this: the verse 4, they married, meaning the two sons married Moabite women, one named Orpha, other named Ruth. If you look at it just upfront, there's nothing fascinating about it. But if you look at it in the cultural context, this marriage needs to be evaluated. See, the word choice that is being used by narrator first is this. He didn't use the regular word for marriage. For example, usually in the scriptures, there will be a word called lacha isa, meaning he took a woman, right? For example, this particular man went and took this woman as his wife, right? That's how the entire scripture employs the word for marriage in terms of relationship. But when you look at this particular verse 3, 4, and 5, the word lacha, take a woman, lacha isa, is not there, but rather nasa isa, meaning they lifted or carry a woman. You know, the word nasa is to lift or to carry, meaning this idiom is used only 9 times in the Old Testament. For example, if you look at Judges 21, 23, now let me read it for you. Judges 21, 23 says, this is what the Benjaminites did while the young women were dancing. See, while the young women were dancing, each man caught one, carried them, meaning they lifted them, and to be their wives. Right? So interesting. So we are given that same expression here, that they carried a woman for themselves, which is pretty much in a negative connotation, is what is being portrayed for us. So these marriages by abduction, so this is a marriage by abduction, which usually happens in an exogamous marriage, meaning you're marrying outside the clan, where you go see somebody, deceiving yourself, claim, and you get them life partner or get them as your wife. That's the first interesting thing about this marriage. Second, this marriage has to be interpreted under the light of Mosaic prohibition of marriage with the pagans. There is a clear-cut definition statement made by God that you are supposed to be very exclusive. You are in the covenant. You are not supposed to be intermingling with people. It's a very clear-cut command. But when Elimelech decides his way and choice, Naomi further goes one step by marrying the women of that particular nation to these two children, Machlon and Kilion. And then the next thing that you see very interesting here is that if you look at the verses 4, like they were living there about 10 years. Wow, 10 years, but they didn't father any children. Right? What's interesting is that the barrenness of Ruth and Orpha must be interpreted in the light of God's punitive hand upon these two people, meaning God closed the womb of these two people. If you look at the covenant curses in Deuteronomy 28:18 for disobedience or going and marrying to the pagan people, there's a clear-cut statement that your womb will be closed. That's exactly what you see here in the statement. And the climatic blow is that after being 10 years in the land, things have been good, suddenly Machlon and Kilion dies in verse 1:5. Now Naomi is left with no husband, no children, no male remnant, nothing to carry forward. Life has turned into an ultimate disaster for her. Now, in the ancient times, in the ancient West Asian society, one of the most important, or somebody who's considered as a blessed family, is through because it's a patriarch society, either a father who takes care of the women, husband takes care of the women, or children takes care of the women. Naomi is now in a position of emptiness. No husband, no children, no grandchildren, nothing. And that is one of the reasons why when she comes back, she calls herself as Mara. Life has been bitter. This is one of the striking things for us. We need to be very, very cautious when we walk away from the presence of God, when we step outside the boundaries of God. You break, you go into shambles, and all agents of disaster will come upon you. That's one of the reasons why God, all the time, throughout the Old Testament, there's one word, if you repeatedly hear, is the word shu, return, come back. You're called to be exclusive, you're different, you're supposed to be light. Today, as you're going to be going back after listening to this episode, the call to you is that you are called to return to God. Return back from the ways that you are in. Come back to the presence of God. Come back to the promises of God. Come back to be under His guidance than walking away when things doesn't seem to be going in your favor. When troubles and turmoils come in your life, you don't decide and design your own answers and plans that you think, oh, in the next 5 years I'm going to be like this. The next 10 years I'm going to be like this. This is what my plan. No, may God bless all of us through this word, that God will continue to minister as we study the book of Ruth in detail. God bless you.